Okay. Hello and welcome. One more time, we're gonna start over. Sorry, I didn't hit the record button. Um, Happy Saturday to anyone who's rolling in and joining me. And turn off my little foot heater here. Um, Today we're gonna talk about soul coasters. And this page that we're looking at here is an example of soul coasters made by Thomas Francis, a VFX artist. Um, and if you're in the VFX community or you've kind of trolled around looking for energy shields or Googled energy shields, you probably saw his effect, his really great effect, showing off some of the more advanced VFX techniques. One of which is soul coasters. So soul coasters are just kind of these strands of geometry that you can scroll a texture along to get the impression that you're using a trail to move some energy around the space, and it's a faster, less math intensive way of kind of getting that trailing feeling that kind of swirls and moves around the space. We'll just take a quick look at Thomas's effect in motion, the soul coaster portion of it at least. So this GIF, you see these kind of trails of energy that are kind of swirling in. Those are all soul coasters. They're just pieces of geometry that have a scrolling texture on them, that give the illusion of sort of ribbons or trails kind of moving through the space. And so we're going to create one of those today. So where do we start? Thomas actually does a great write up here in 80 level. This portion here, particularly energy sweeps slash soul coasters, is generally what we're going to talk about today, and we're going to try to get really close to what he makes here. The point of this isn't to fully recreate his effect, but just more to talk about soul coasters in general, and we'll just kind of delve into that this kind of thing because it can be really effective and useful. So let's get started. So and I linked the link in the Twitch chat there for anyone who's interested in seeing more of Thomas's 80 level page. It's there for you. So let me make sure the Twitch stream is still happening. Yeah, everything's good. Cool. Okay. So we'll move Thomas off to the side, and you'll see that I'm in a fresh Unreal project, which is cool. Nothing's happening here. That's really gonna. It's all empty. Literally just created this. So first thing I want to do is come over here to the content folder, right click, create a new folder, and call it maps. Because sometimes middle of these streams I remember that I haven't saved the level yet. So save current in the maps folder, and we're going to call it demo map. And that's there for us. So now we have a map. We're going to right click again and create a folder, and we're going to call it models. And we'll move the models folder into just the content folder, move there. And we'll start in Blender making something to go with this soul coaster explanation. And it's not going to be too complicated, and I'll show you, kind of the basics first, and then, we can evolve them therein. And if we don't get something close to what Thomas made, it's all good. This is all for fun, and we're all just sort of learning something new today. So if you know about soul coasters already, then that's great. You can chime in the chat and give some pointers and feedback if you like. That's what I'm here for. So where I'm going to start is in Blender. I'm going to add a mesh cylinder. And most soul coasters are sort of just slatted geo that kind of goes around in kind of an arcing shape. So we're gonna reconstruct one of those real quick here. So in Blender, I'm gonna select the cylinder I added and go and hit Tab to go into Edit mode, and then go up here to Face Select, and I'm gonna select the top face and delete it. Face, the bottom face, hit Delete on my keyboard and select Face. So the top and bottom are gone. We come up here to our selections, and I'm gonna do vertices. And before I drag select, which I often forget to do, I'm gonna turn on X-ray mode, because if I don't and I drag select here in the window, half the vertices don't get selected, and I want all of them. So I'm gonna turn on X-ray mode, and I'm gonna drag select again, and that got all of them, right? That's what we want. So if we go to front view, and we hit S to scale and then Z to scale only in the Z direction, I'm going to scale this down so it's a little bit more flat, you see? And so now we kind of have that kind of slatted ring shape that I was talking about here. One thing that might be really effective is doing a cross section of geo, like Thomas is doing in his 80 level explanation, and we'll get to that. I just want to kind of get us a general sense of how soul coasters work initially. So I'm gonna make sure that the UVs are laid out the way that we want them to. So I'm gonna drag open a new viewport, and we're gonna come up here to the kind of viewport selection, editor type selection, and we're gonna do UV editor. And if we look, these UVs are only on half the space. And for the purposes of soul coasters, we want the UV space to be fully occupied here. So if we select these bottom UVs and we hit N to open up the kind of tool selection, like the details panel of these viewports, we can see that the Y value is set to 0.5. And in Blender, it's kind of a upside down sense as opposed to Unreal Engine, which the 0, 0 is in the top left corner. But so if we set this Y value to 0, then it pushes the UVs down to the bottom, and our geometry occupies the full length of this UV space, which is what we want. The only other thing I might do is give this another edge loop of geo. Sometimes when you drop a model into Unreal Engine with no edge loops in between, you get some kind of strange behavior. So let's avoid that. I just went to the loop cut tool. I dropped an edge loop in the center here, and I'm gonna hit Tab to go out of edit mode. And the only other thing we need to do is, if you look here at the geo, it's got these kind of slats to it. These kind of, you can really see the faces defined, and we want it to be a little bit more smooth. For like a visual effect. So we're going to come up here to Object, Shade Smooth, and that removes those slats for us, which is great. So everything should be set up for us. We're going to save this file as for the viewer. Oh, first time viewer. Bad reading on my part. Awesome. Thank you for the Mr. Miami Night for the love, man. So we're going to go find our project here. It's I happen to know it's on the F drive, Unreal Projects, and we're gonna go over here to Twitch, 1120 Soul Coaster, and in the content folder, it didn't give us our map folder, so we'll create one ourselves, or our models folder, models, and in models we're gonna drop this new Soul Coaster file. We're gonna name it Soul Coaster. With an A, coaster, and save. Now this isn't going to be helpful for the engine. The engine wants FBXs. So if we come up here, we can go to Export FBX and have our model selected, and we'll say only export what's selected. It's the only thing in the viewport. But if you happen to be working on something else and you just want to select the only model, you can do it with selected object. And in that same folder, models folder, we're going to put in Soul Coaster. And maybe we'll name it Soul Coaster 1, because maybe what we'll do is have variations on this so we can see the whole process. Soul Coaster 1, export. So back in Editor, we're going to get an import message here. And if we hit import and we look in this models folder, import, it's going to say, give us some options here. We don't want to do anything special here. Just hit import. And it should drop our model right there, which is exactly what we want. And you get an editor smoothing groups issue, and that doesn't mean anything to us at the moment. So if we double click on our Soul Coaster, you'll see our model from Blender, which is great. Simple, easy Blender model. So that's what we're going to use to make this effect. And to get us started using it as an effect, rather than sort of wait for a long time, I'll just show you how to create the Niagara particle system that's going to use this. So if we come over here to our folders and we right click and add a folder, we're going to add a folder for particles, and we'll drag this folder out to the content folder. And so in particles, maps, mode, yeah, cool. Particles, if we right click and we go to effects, Niagara emitter, we can create a new emitter from template. Is what I normally do. And we could start with empty, but it creates this scenario where we have to remember a lot of the necessary things for an emitter to work. So let's just start with a pre-made template like directional burst. Now, the reason I chose directional burst is because it's what VFX artists call a one shot, right? It's going to play one time and then kill itself, or the particles will die and the emitter will stop, which is what we kind of want for this effect. I guess maybe not initially, but we'll change that when we get in there. So we're going to call this PS underscore Soul Coaster. And again, I keep using the word Soul Coaster, and I want to stress that this is not my name. The VFX community came up with Soul Coaster. I think it's perfectly reasonable, but some people think it sounds silly. If you right click on an emitter and you come up here in this window, you can do Create Niagara System. And this Niagara System is made from the emitter that you made. So right now it's holding the emitter that we made, which is the directional burst. So if we want to edit this directional burst, we can close the system and come over here to emitter and double click and open. And now we'll have access to our directional burst. So it just kind of looks like sparks, which is kind of cool. But it's not what we're looking for here. So we got to make some changes. If we come over here to our particle emitter stack here, if we come down to render, we can immediately change away from these sprites to use a model renderer. So what we'll do is we'll right click, delete this renderer, and we'll hit the plus sign next to render here and add a mesh renderer, because we made a mesh in Blender, and so that's what we want to use here. So if we go over here to Soul Coaster, now we're spitting out a bunch of our Soul Coasters, right? As opposed to the sprites, the directional sprites we had. Something else we want to do here is add a material to this, and we haven't created one yet. So let's make a couple changes here, and then we'll go create our material. We don't really want in the long run for our Soul Coasters to be kind of spat out like this, so let's stop a lot of the forces and velocity going on here. We're gonna turn off drag. We're gonna turn off gravity. So now the velocity cone is pushing everything, but nothing is falling. We're gonna turn off velocity cone. So now everything should just be kind of static at the middle. And if you ever get kind of lost in the viewport, say you get turned around or something, or you're off to the side and you want to focus back on your effect, if you just hit F in this window, it'll refocus you on the effect you're creating. And then I normally hit hold down Alt and right click, and that drags you slowly towards or away from. So that's just a helpful tip if you ever get lost in the viewport. So we need to go and create a material for this. So if we go back out to our content folder and we right click new folder and we call this folder materials, we can go into materials and right click, create a new material, and we can call it M underscore Soul Coaster, because we may make more than one, but this could be like a master material, Soul Coaster. And if we double click, we get into the material editor. Now, one thing I know we're going to need for this is a texture. So rather than kind of set up this material without that texture, we should go into Photoshop and make a quick texture. In terms of what I'm seeing on Thomas's version of this effect, here, I just want to remind everybody what the kind of reference is here. This kind of slatted jutting lines kind of texture is probably multiple kind of strokes of material on the texture space, as opposed to maybe a giant dot or something like this. So I'll kind of show you what I would do if I wanted to get something close to that over here in Photoshop. So we'll hit new, and we'll create a new 512 by 512 texture. I think that's fine. And we'll zoom in, and I'll start with something really mundane and not complicated at all. Let me zoom in a little bit so it's not so far away for you all on the stream. And yeah, so we'll get over here to the new layers. Trying to find my mouse. I lost him for a minute there. And we'll add a new layer. This bottom layer we're going to fill with black. And we are going to go up here to our layers, and we're going to say new background from layer. And that way we have a background layer, because you never know if we end up wanting to do something interesting or fill the channels or channel pack or something like this. But rather than be really precious right now, I'm going to kind of try to be artistic and be kind of quick about it. I'm going to grab my tablet here and I'm going to just come over here to brushes and make sure I'm using a soft brush here, or maybe a hard brush is fine. And I'm going to come over here and make sure that in my brush settings, I have shape dynamics turned on so that my stroke is a little tapered when I let up on the brush. And I'm not going to do anything complicated. I'm just going to like kind of, do some strokes. Oh, interesting. Pen pressure. I got pen pressure. Huh. Why are shape dynamics working right now? Interesting. Okay. Well, rather than figure that out, I'm gonna just be artistic in another way. I'm gonna clear this layer because I don't want to waste a bunch of people's time doing technical stuff. I'm gonna draw these, and then I'm gonna just erase away what I don't want. So vertical lines, something like this. Maybe a short one here. And then maybe a real long one that's way more spaced, because I think my first three were pretty close together. And what I'll do is I'll just sort of erase away, make the taper myself. I have to figure out why my so my eraser has opacity and flow turned down, so I want to just turn them up. Again, I don't want to be precious about this. I'm just sort of trying to make these look tapered and not just sort of like strokes of a rounded pen. I probably could do a selection here and kill this one, and then Control D, and then use a brush that's a little larger. I'll make it seem artistic, more artistic than it was when I drew it. So yeah, so I'll just erase away this last part here, and we'll jump back in and eraser. Come on, eraser. Yeah, and we'll jump back in and into the engine with this texture and see if we can't start to get something going. We may come back here and mess with a bunch of stuff, but we just need something that's in this vein to get us started here. And yeah, we'll talk more about this in a second. Let me save this. Save as. That was a lot of work for like a pretty simple texture, but my tablet is on the fritz, I guess. Let me go up 2 folders to today, and in the content folder, we're going to right click and create a texture folder. I'll come back and paint something more pretty later, but we just need to get our stuff working. That's normally my advice for folks who are working on an effect, is like just draw something crappy. I'll just call it lines or something. I think in the long run we'll maybe want some like noise or something to actually be effective. T_lines is what we're going to call this one. And we're going to keep it as a Photoshop file because we'll come back here and mess with stuff after. So in Engine, we're going to hit Import here. Let me make sure we are still recording and everybody's still with me. Okay, awesome. So if I hold T and I left click, I'm going to get a texture in our material here. And if we search, our only texture is the one I just created, which is great. And what we're going to do is drag this. We're gonna change the blend mode of this material from opaque to translucent, and we're gonna make the shading model unlit. We don't really need, specular roughness or any of that stuff. All we wanted was a mask, which we just made in Photoshop, and a way to change the color of that mask via the particle system. If we want to see what this texture looks like on our model, we can come over here to our models folder and we can select our Soul Coaster and go back to our material. And if you just hit this little teapot here, it'll bring in your model into the material editor so that you can see your texture on your model. So I'm realizing now that I set our UVs up incorrectly, and it's a thing I forget to do all the time. Or, so there's two ways to solve this problem. One is to change the way your UVs are or change the way your texture looks, but I'm going to do UVs. So back in Blender here, I select everything, and because this kind of center line is horizontal here, that means these UVs are laid out horizontally, but the texture we drew in Photoshop is sort of laid out vertically. These lines going across the space are vertical. So I'm going to flip these UVs by selecting them all and hitting R and then choosing 90 or typing 90. And if you see up at the top there, it says rotate 90 degrees. And if I hit enter, that rotates our UVs for us to fit better with the texture we just made. So I'm going to save, and I'm going to export this model, tab, export this model, FBX, Soul Coaster, export, bring it back into the engine here. And if I import, now we get those kind of horizontal lines that I was looking for on this mesh. And they're a bit, see, yeah, and this is what I thought would happen, right? They're not necessarily anything to sneeze at. So rather than sit here and mess with them, I'm going to go back to Photoshop real quick, and I'm going to just paint in some extra noise here. And we'll try to be as artistic as we can to kind of give us some more texture information. Yeah, see, that's too like specifically human. Yeah, so maybe something like this. Maybe we'll leave that piece kind of by itself, and then we'll paint a little here. I know it doesn't look pretty. We're gonna do it up top here. But you're going to see why it's better to just fill the space with stuff. And I can blur it, which is what I'm about to do. Come up here and grab everything and maybe shrink it. And then hit enter and then blur it. Filter, blur, Gaussian is what I'll probably use. So now it's kind of, it's less obvious that it's terrible art and more of like a noise pattern. And maybe I'll double it up. I don't know. We'll see. Let's stretch this out first, and then save again and go back to the engine and let that import. So now we have a little bit more, texture information there, right? It's a little closer to what we were looking at for him. We'll probably want this material to be two-sided. So if we go over here to two-sided and we select that, that'll give us some more information on both sides of the mesh, right? So now we're even closer to what we were looking at in the reference. And the only other thing I want to do here is add particle color. Let me put this away because we might come back and draw in a minute, but I don't think we need it right now. Yeah, so particle color. And what's important here is that we want to control both the color and the opacity of the particles, the mesh particles, via the particle editor. So we'll plug our particle color, our RGB, into emissive color, and we'll hold M and left click for a multiply, and we'll plug our opacity, particle opacity, and our mask and multiply them together so we can fade out our mask over time, over the particle's lifetime. So nothing should look different aside from the fact that these lines are not going to be white. And I really like kind of the scratchy feel of this material now. I think it's really really working for us to describe kind of a similar feeling to the reference. So hopefully everyone else feels the same way. So yeah, so let's save this. Let's not leave yet. Let's give ourselves the ability to move this on the mesh. And we'll start with a panner, and then I'll explain why we want to do it differently later. So a panner, for all those who don't really know a whole lot about materials, just gives us the ability to scroll this texture that we laid out on our mesh along the mesh's UVs. So if I plug this coordinate pin, or the out pin of this panner into the UVs, nothing will change. But what we did was we gave ourselves the ability to actually move this across the model. So if we were to scroll our texture or move our texture along the model in the Y direction, it would scroll and spin around the outside of this model, which is what we're looking to do. So to do that, you just click on your panner and you add some value to the Y, say a 1, and then what we'll get is that texture actually moving along. See? And so that's kind of cool, right? A lot of VFX artists use this as a way to do sword swipes with meshes, or to create kind of some swirling energy, at the foot of a character in the middle of a charge up or something like this. So this is a perfectly reasonable way to accomplish this kind of movement via a mesh, is using a panner. So back in the editor, if we save our work here, which I'm going to do, save. And then we look back in our particle editor, we'll see here, once this loads, oh, we never put the material on, lol. If we come over here to Mesh Renderer and we click Override Material, that'll give us the ability to throw whatever material we want on this mesh. So what we have to do is add to the material array list, hit the plus sign here, and this material we're going to use is Soul Coaster. So once we add that on, and this compiles, which I think is probably happening over here, yeah, so 20, it's just compiling the shader, it's coming here in a second. What you'll see is that swirling behavior on these particles, right? And right now we're only popping, we're bursting 75 particles, but they're not, they're all kind of layered and stacked on top of each other. We could do this with one, right? Now we only have one particle there. So that's kind of cool, right? It's like a spinning, swirling energy piece. So if we save this and we go back to the engine or back to the viewport, if we want, we can see this in the world. We can drag and drop the Niagara system for Soul Coaster into the world, and now we have our particle system in there in the world. And because this doesn't loop, we're only going to see it the one time. To get it to play again, we have to select that Niagara system, and we hit question mark on our keyboard, and then we see our effect, which is awesome. We made something today. We should be proud of that, and it's actually pretty cool. To improve this effect, we can, or to get closer to the reference we had, first we should save all, because I'm a compulsive saver and I think things often break. What we really want isn't just sort of when the mesh starts its lifetime, if I hit question mark again, boom, it just pops on and it's fully visible, and then we kind of fade it out over time. What we really want is the texture to scroll onto the mesh and then off of the mesh at some point. And it's more evident what's happening if it wasn't a ring texture, or I'm sorry, a ring mesh that we created in Blender. So what we'll do is we'll create a new mesh, or not a new mesh, a second version of this mesh that I'll make into something other than a ring here in a moment. But what I want to do is give us the ability to move the texture along the mesh's UVs via the particle system, as opposed to just setting a value here and just hoping that it looks okay. We can have full control via the particle system by using something called dynamic parameters. So if we right click in the material and we search for dynamic, you'll see dynamic parameter here. And what you'll want to do is instead of using a panner here, which a panner, just as a teaching point, is just us utilizing time. If we right click and look for time, and adding the value of time to the UVs on every tick, which moves the texture through the UV space some distance every tick. Time is really the defining factor, or the usefulness of a panner, is that it does the work of adding a value every tick via this panner. So another way to accomplish this panner behavior is to just add. So if we hold A and we left click, we'll get an add node. Is to add time to the UVs themselves. Built into this panner is the UV coordinates, are the default behavior. So if we just right click and we look for TEXCO, texture coordinate, this is just the generic UVs. If we drop this down, you'll see that it's red and green in both directions and yellow in the center where they kind of meet. And this is just generic 0 to 1 UVs. So if we add time to those UVs and we plug this into the UVs of the texture instead of the panner, we're going to get the same behavior that the panner had, aside from the fact that this is going to kind of go in the vertical direction as well. But see, panners are the same thing. It's just adding time to the UVs. And what's unique or interesting about panners is that you get the opportunity to set a specific value for that time, which in our case, if we wanted to multiply time by some value, say 0, meaning don't move at all, we would get the same behavior as the panner, right? We can specify how fast or how much influence we want time to have on our scrolling UVs. Right now 0, or if the speed was 0, that means don't move at all. And then if I gave time some multiplier, some value to multiply against, like say 0.5, this is half the speed of time, right? And it would be the same as putting a 0.5 in the speed values here. A way to give ourselves the ability to change both the x and the y speed independently, much like the panner does, would be to use two points of data for speed. The way you can construct 2 points of data is by using what they call an append node. So if we right click and look for append vector, we can jam this into the multiplication against time, and Unreal is going to complain because it doesn't like you creating an append or trying to create a vector 2 without giving it any points of data. So we're going to give it a 0.5, and the A pin here is for the x value, so the left and right UV position, and the B pin is for the y value, so the up and down vertical UV position. And so now we have we've given it 2 points of data, and this should be the same as when we were just multiplying time times 0.5. But now, instead of going vertical with our scrolling as well as horizontal, if I was to set 0 in the x direction, we'll get exactly what we had here with the panner, which is that only the y value is actually causing the scrolling to happen. So the reason I told you all this at all is because instead of using a set value here, again, we're going to use something we can actually change via the particle system. So instead of making our y value this sort of constant float, we're gonna give it a parameter so that we can change it later in the particle editor. So if we click on our dynamic parameter and we change the name of this to something like, say, texture scroll speed, we can plug texture scroll speed into the y value or the B pin of this append, and the default behavior or the default value for this dynamic parameter down here is a value of 1. So it's scrolling around at a speed of 1. So we can do this, and that gives us the same behavior as the panner. But again, this is just scrolling it through the space at some constant speed. And what we want is over the lifetime of the particle, over the lifetime of the mesh-based Soul Coaster, we scroll the texture through the space and then off the other side. So rather than use time at all, we're going to just remove this portion and just use adding some value to the texture coordinates via the particle editor over the lifetime of the particle. So right now this will be nothing. Nothing will move here. But if I delete my panner here, if I save this and I go back to the particle editor, after this saves, I go back to the particle editor. Now our particle isn't moving, but we have access to our new dynamic parameters, right? So if we come over here to particle update, which means not at the start of the particle lifetime particle spawn, but over the lifetime of the particle, I want to do something. If I hit the plus sign and I look for DYN, dynamic material parameters, we can add this to our list of modules here. And I normally try to push it up to the top and let some of these other things, sprite scale by speed, we can turn off, we don't need that. be the last things in the list. Um, Dynamic parameter, and if you look here, texture scroll is one of the available parameters to be changed, right? So we could right now just set a value of 0.5, and that moves the texture, right? Or we can do it over the lifetime of the particle via a curve. So if we hit this drop down and we look for curve, float from curve, now we're getting it to move over the lifetime of the particle. We're starting at a value of 1 and we're going to a value of 0, right? And this could be the opposing. It could be starting at a value of 0 and then going to a value of 1 at the end of the particle lifetime. And that gives us that spinning motion, which is great, which is exactly what we want. Now, it's still not moving through the space, and I'll tell you why that is. By default, UVs repeat on themselves, right? So once the texture hits the end of the UV space, once it moves all the way across the mesh, one revolution, and comes back around, it recreates the texture again. It allows the texture to sort of fold back on itself and start again at the beginning of the mesh. So we're never going to not see texture here. And for the purposes of a Soul Coaster, we want for us to not see texture as it moves across the mesh's UVs, and then not see texture again as it moves off the other side of the mesh's UVs. And I hope that makes sense. And I'll demonstrate that again here on the mesh here in Blender. If I hit tab to see the UVs, essentially what we want is for these UVs, if I hit GY, imagine there's a texture here on where this box is gray, right? We want the behavior where we don't see any texture, right? So there's no texture represented on the UVs here. And as we scroll the UVs, the texture through the UV space, we want to see the texture along the entirety of the mesh. And then as the lifetime expires on the particles, we then move those UVs or the texture off of the UVs again so that we don't see texture representation again, right? So move it through the space is really what we're trying to do for this effect. And so I'll show you how we can set it up to do that over here in Unreal. So rather than just use a generic UV method where they always fold back on themselves and constantly represent the texture, no matter where the UV position is, we are going to clamp those UVs, meaning we only allow texture representation in the 0 to 1 space. The way to do that is select your texture sample, and you can double click on it and go see it here. And over here in your texture header here, there's a little kind of show advanced arrow, and if you click that, you get access to these tiling methods, the X and Y tiling methods. And what you want to do here is change it from wrapping to clamp, and then save that. And then now if you go back to your particles, what you'll see is when it compiles, what you'll see is the texture is actually moving off the mesh and not sort of repeating. You see, there's a definite ending, which is how people normally sort of handle these kinds of Soul Coaster moving a trail through space type behaviors, is they actually clamp the tiling method so that what we get is this sort of moving through the space and then kind of evaporating or dying off feeling. So we're in a good position right now. What we want to change is, instead of having the textures just sort of start on the mesh fully visible and then go to not be seen at all, we want to start the texture where it's not visible, then it's visible as it moves along the mesh, and then not visible again. So instead of using a value of 0 at the start, we're going to use a value of -1. Right? So not visible, visible, not visible, right? So we're actually kind of moving it through the space as opposed to just sort of letting it start fully visible. Now there is this kind of additional strange behavior where the mesh starts and ends, and it's kind of a harsh ending. And we can do something about that via the material. let's go ahead and tackle that right now. And then we're going to try to make this look a little pretty, and then we're going to make some advancements to it, and we'll get something closer to what Thomas made. So we've done all we needed to do with the texture here, so we're going to let that go. So rather than the top and bottom of this material being interesting. Is this set to it's set to a value of 1 by default, which means we're not going to see it. Let's set it to a value of 0 by default. That way we can actually see the texture on the UV space. Because we went and made this clamped, now if the value is 1, it's moved off the texture space and we can't see it anymore, right? So we want to be able to see it while we do some work here. So rather than have a harsh kind of ending, which maybe it makes more sense to make this value something like 0.5. So now we're kind of halfway off the UV space, so we'll be able to see our hard edge that we're trying to take care of. So yeah, so now rather than allow the particles to die at this hard edge of the mesh, let's add some kind of soft fall off there to help ourselves make something that's a bit more believable. So what we want to do is utilize our texture coordinates, our UVs again. Texture coordinates are constructed or made of two gradients going in different directions, and I'll show you what those gradients look like, just so we're all clear on what I'm talking about. So if I can use a component mask, which is essentially saying I want to isolate or see only a singular channel of my 2-channel texture coordinates, and I look at just the R channel, you'll see that it's just a horizontal gradient. And this is more easily seen on a mesh or on some kind of plane or something like this. So rather than continue to look at it on our model, I'm going to look at it on a plane here. And I'm going to right-click Start Preview Node. So yeah, so our texture coordinate UVs are just 2 channels of data, each of which are a gradient going in a different direction. For R, it's a horizontal gradient, black on the right side, white on the left side. So 0 on the left side, 1 on the right side. Evening, do you save your VODs? Yes, I do. Yes, yeah. They're all on YouTube, last week's as well. So feel free to catch up or watch the rest of this and then watch the beginning later. However that works best for you. But I'm glad you're here, and I appreciate you continuing to watch these. And thank you for joining us. So I was explaining that UVs are just two channels of data, each of which are a gradient. So right now we're looking at the red channel, which is the horizontal of the 2 gradients, and the left side is a value of 0 and the right side is a value of 1. And the green channel, if I was to switch this, so the green channel is a vertical gradient, the bottom of which is a value of 1 and the top of which is a value of 0, so black on the top, white on the bottom. Why that's important or relevant to us is because we can utilize these gradients as a multiplier against our mask, so that as our texture mask pulls off the, of course, anytime, Kiker. I'm all about wanting to give back to other effects artists who are really interested in this. It's my goal. Kiker's saying, I'm glad you're here and I appreciate you sharing your knowledge. I thank you as well for showing up and letting me. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna multiply our texture by these texture coordinates, by the G of the texture coordinates, and I'll show you what that does for us on the actual model after I put these pins together. So we'll multiply the results of our panned texture by this this gradient that we're getting from our UV coordinates. So if I stop previewing here and I go back to the model we're using, Soul Coaster, and we go back to our material and we click the teapot, now we're looking at our model again. And on that edge that used to be really hard, now we have soft fall off, you see? Easier to see if I get closer. Now we have a soft fall off. which is what we want, rather than that kind of hard-edged area where the texture is kind of scrolling off and dying. We have kind of a soft ending, which is great. We want the same on the beginning, right? So if I change this to be a value of negative 0.5, meaning I'm just scrolling onto the space, and this will update. Now we have the hard edge on the other side, right? So really what we want is what I call a sandwich gradient, right? Which is some fall off on the top and bottom, and in both of those fall offs allow us to have that kind of soft ending to the mesh. So what I'm going to do is take the gradient we are already getting from G and use a 1 minus. Let's search for 1 minus here, which is really just wherever I was black, I'm now white, and wherever I was white, I'm now black. It's a reverse, an inverse, sometimes they call it in other engines. And if we multiply those against each other, we get what I call a gradient sandwich, which is black on the top and bottom and white in the middle. And it'll show up here in a moment when this loads, right? So gradient sandwich, black on the top, black on the bottom, white in the center. Now, if you're eagle-eyed viewers, clever mathematicians will understand that the gradient that's created when I multiply these two vertical gradients together isn't between the values of 0 and 1. And really for materials, we always want to try to keep our values between a value of 0 and 1. It's just the most easily used range of values. So when you multiply two gradients like these against each other, we're essentially saying in the original version of this gradient, we were black on top, which is a value of 0. In the flipped version, we're white on top, which is a value of 1. 0 times 1 is 0. The same is correct for the bottom, right? Bottom is white, a value of 1. And then the flipped version, the bottom is 0. Black, a value of 0. 1 times 0 is 0. That's why we're black on top and bottom. In the center of these linear gradients that go from 1 to 0, the center is 0.5, right? So if we're doing our multiplication the same way we were doing a second ago, 0.5 times 0.5 is 0.25, right? Not a value of 1 here, which is why this gradient is dim. So if we wanted a value of 0.25 to equal a value of 1, we would multiply that 0.25 times 4, right? And that would give us that value of 1 again. So now this gradient sandwich that we created is between a value of 0 and 1. And we're going to use that as our fall off. And we'll give ourselves a little bit more control over it in a second here, but I just want to show you. See, now we have soft fall off on this edge as well, which is great. So if I was to push this texture to the 0 value, meaning it's on fully invisible, we are seeing everything, and as we scroll off, so say negative 0.5, we're going to get soft fall off on this edge, and 0.5 we're going to get soft fall off on the other edge. And so if we reset this value to a value of negative 1, or let's set it to 0 because the particle system is taking care of the positioning, so we can see it in the material. If we save this and we go look at our particles again, we won't see that hard edge we were having before, which is great. So back in our particle system, see, now they're dying off with kind of a soft edge, which is better, which is way better. They're scrolling on and off with a soft edge. The illusion is kept up, which is what we want. So if we save, and let's make this a little bit more pretty, right? Right now we've just been looking at kind of a white swoosh kind of motion, and I want some color. So let's go over here to initial particle, and let's change the color to be some more spectacular value. This is kind of a blue color, and I think Thomas's effect, if we go look at our reference again for a second, is kind of this blue-green, turquoise, bright, emissive kind of color. So let's try to see if we can get something like that. Blue-green, kind of turquoise color, but ours is kind of stale. It's bland. It's not as bright and hot as Thomas's is. The way to get that to happen for our color here is to come over here to our V value, which is kind of our like multiplier, our sort of how bright is this color going to be. So it's rather than use a value of 1, for those who aren't really familiar with PBR values, 0 to 1 is kind of the generic color space in PBR. And anytime you go above a value of 1, things start to sort of bloom or self-illuminate. They give the appearance of self-illumination. So if I set this value to something like 5, you start to see that this color gets a little bit closer to white and also brighter. And if I was to go to 20, now it's pretty bright, right? And it's more evident if I save and go to a space that actually has some lighting. You can see, if I hit question mark again, you can see it's a bit brighter here, right? Closer to Thomas's reference, though there are some differences and obvious ones, and we'll try to tackle those here in a moment. We're getting closer. One of the things I like to do in all of my test worlds, demo maps, is set up lighting to make sure that when I start to create some things that are a bit more emissive, like Thomas's effect here, I can see them better. So what I like to do is come over here to the Place Actors tab, and if you don't have that open or don't know where it is, you can go to Window and Place Actors and open that up. And if you search the Volume tab for post-processing volume, you can come in and drop one of those. Now, anyone who's not familiar with the post-processing volume, it's a useful tool for changing the LUT, the color, the brightness, intensity, the lots of stuff. It gives you saturation, all kinds of things that you might be able to do in a lot of like other image editing programs. What we're most interested in is like the bloom intensity, the amount of bloom, and the range of bloom that we can actually get via our particles. And so one of the things we want to do first before we start changing any of the values in this post-processing volume is coming down here to the post-processing volume settings. And under infinite extent unbound, if we check that box, this means that we don't need to be inside the post-processing volume to get the effects of the post-processing. It happens all across this map, which is great. We don't want to try to change the size of the volume to make it work for us right now. We just want it to happen everywhere. If we come back up here to the top, we're under the Lens tab here, under the Lens dropdown. If we open Exposure and we check box on the min and max brightness, if we change these values to both be a value of 1, meaning don't make the range some wide thing where some things can be dark, some things bright. Just make everything seem pretty consistently bright. And I select my particle system and I hit question mark again. Now we're getting some of that bloom that we're looking for with this effect, which is great. The lifetime of these particles is so random. So sometimes it happens real slow, and I'm pretty surprised. So let's just change the lifetime to be something a little bit more consistent. Instead of random, let's make them all the same, and then when we actually polish this effect, we'll make them different. Let's do 0.5. So pretty fast. And that way we'll get, and actually we'll come back and change this later as well. The looping behavior is set to play to once, which is why every time we do the effect, it plays once and I have to hit question mark again. But if I did infinite, it would just continue to play these. So now we don't have to go set up some process of having these play over and over. They just play over and over for us, so we can get a good sense of what our particle looks like. So if I hit G to hide all the widgets, we got a pretty good setup here. One of the things I like to do as I continue to work on effects is set up a space where I can actually kind of get a good sense of what they look like. So rather than continue to look at this checkerboard floor and all this stuff, I'm going to create a quick floor material. So I'm going to right click in the materials folder and I'm going to create m_floor. And I'm going to double click on m_floor. And I'm going to hold 3 and left click to create a vector 3, a color. And I'm going to right click and convert this to parameter. And I'm going to call it, I'm going to just call it color. And I'm going to choose a color for the floor, which is just going to be like a dark gray. I don't want it to kind of steal the show. I want the particles to be there. So we'll use a dark gray and we'll plug this into base color. And because I don't want my floor to be shiny or reflective or anything, I'm going to drop 2 constant values here, hold 1 and left click twice. And for one of them, I'm going to use a value of 0, and for the other, I'm going to use a value of 1. and I'm going to put 0 into specular, meaning don't make me shiny. And I'm going to put a 1 into roughness, meaning, yeah, make me pretty rough, like as if I was like a concrete floor or something like this, something that doesn't have a lot of sheen at all. And then I just give myself the ability with this parameter, this color parameter, to change the color of the floor later if I want to get weird, right? I'm going to probably keep it at a dark gray, but having the ability to change the color is what's important here. So if I come over here and I right-click on my floor material and I create a material instance, that gives me the ability to double-click this instance and change the color of the floor. And if the floor tile, which I'm going to just continue to utilize the generic floor they have, but I'm going to change the scale to something like 300, stretch it way out, right? And this could be like a 0.1 or something. It doesn't matter. We're not going to see that edge anyway. But instead of the default material, this checker box pattern, I'm going to drag m_floor instance, right? So now we just have kind of an infinite gray floor that that isn't too fancy, and we don't need to do anything too cool to be able to see our particle better. So if I go back to the outliner and I select our Soul Coaster particle, I can zero it out so that it's closer to the floor and just bring it up a little bit, and then hit F to focus in. And now we got ourselves kind of a little demo space, which is great. And then G to hide everything, and now we're looking at it again, but just in a better lighting and in better with a better floor that's not sort of stealing the show, right? So let's save everything because we've done a lot of great work here. We're still not really close to what the reference is, right? The reference is like I'm gathering energy at the center point. It's all kind of like pulling into this middle piece. So rather than use rings, we probably want like strands of geo that kind of do this kind of spinny, whirly kind of behavior. So let's change the model that we're using to not be these kind of circular ring shapes anymore. Let's make something a bit more kind of trail strand that's kind of moving along. So let's talk about how we do that. So we go back to Blender here, and rather than change this current mesh, let's leave it so that we just have something to look at and compare against. We'll just copy paste our current cylinder, and we'll call this strand. That way we have some difference here, and we'll hide the old cylinder, and we'll select strand, and we'll hit tab to go in. UVs are the same, everything is the same, right? Aside from, let's figure out where the edge is here. By default, the default behavior of Blender is it doesn't associate what you select with what you here in the UV editor with what you see in the viewport, but you can make it do that by hitting these little kind of UV sync selection arrows. And now, if you select nothing in the UV editor, it selects nothing here, right? And if I select the top, it selects that portion of the geo here. And sometimes that's a better way of editing because you want to know what your selection is in the UV editor, and sometimes you don't. So you get the option there, but that's how you turn it on. In this case, I want to, because I want to come to the edge of this geo, wherever that edge is, and rather than be precious and split the geo and try to figure out how best to, I'm just going to delete some faces. So I'll go to face selection here, and I'm going to just delete these two faces. Yeah, I'm going to delete these two faces. And before I do what I was about to do, I'm reminded that Thomas's method, and a lot of people's methods with Soul Coasters, my own included, is that they kind of are cross sections of geo in some instances. Sometimes they're kind of crossed like this, and sometimes they are just singular strands. In Thomas's reference here, it looks like he's using singular strands, not cross sections, but I could be wrong about that. Yeah, it doesn't really look like he's using cross sections, so maybe we won't yet. But then maybe we'll do take a stab at doing it with cross sections. For now, let's make this simple. I'm gonna do a vertex select, and I'm gonna use what's called proportional editing, meaning when I move these verts here, all the other verts that are in close proximity to these verts will move themselves as well. So if I come up here to the top and I turn on proportional editing, what'll happen is as I move this, you see all the other verts that are in the general vicinity also move, and I can change the influence of that by scrolling our middle mouse more or less, and you can see how it kind of has an effect. As I shrink it, less movement. As I grow it, more parts of the geo are actually affected. Proportional editing is great for the kind of thing I'm about to do, which I'm going to undo, and actually drag this piece down so it extends out the geo a little bit. I'm going to do it. There's plenty of options for kind of how the other verts move in relation to the ones you're moving. I want to do it linearly, so I get kind of a pretty specific fall off behavior. And also, as I move this, it's moving the ones that are pretty close to me, but they're at the end of the chain, and I don't want those ones to move. And so rather than just any geo that's close, I'm going to select connected only, meaning if you're connected to me, move those, and the further away you are from me and the less connected you are to me, you get less influence. So as I move this now, you'll see that this right side isn't moving anymore, right? So if I scroll this mouse wheel up and I continue to drag down to a certain point, probably right there, what'll happen is I'll get kind of one of these kind of strands, right? These kind of swirly rings, which is what Thomas is using, right? This is pretty close to what Thomas has in his effect. So the only problem with this now is that the geo isn't kind of centered, and the way Thomas is using his is that he's actually kind of pulling all the energy into a center point. So all I'm going to do is select everything and just drag and kind of eyeball it. I'm not being precious because this is a stream and we're just having fun, and there's no reason for us to be exact about this. But if you wanted to in the future, you all are welcome to kind of make the appropriate changes to your geo to make it work. One of the things that's kind of interesting about all of Thomas's geo in this effect is that they kind of bow out in the center. So we can use proportional editing for that as well if we really want to. We can kind of look at this in side view now that we have our kind of spinny, whirly geo, and we can maybe select some of the verts that are in the center here. Something like these guys. Maybe, yeah, those are pretty centered. And if I use maybe smooth as opposed to linear, and I hold S to scale, I can probably, if I shrink my influence here, probably scale just the middle ones. Yeah, there's a way to kind of get this to look okay. Maybe that scale is only in one direction or something, but that's a way you can do it. You can maybe what I'll do is scale Z only, maybe. Yeah, see it kind of, maybe we don't want Z at all. There's a good artistic way to get that similar behavior where the center is really fat, and maybe it's before we do the kind of swirly bits we grow the center to be fatter. But for now, I think this is an okay starting of the experiment. So I'm going to save this strand, and I'm going to export strand FBX. Instead of Soul Coaster 1, we're going to call this Soul Coaster 2. And we'll hit export. And we'll go back to the engine, and we're going to get import here. Not that I'm a fan of patting myself on the back all the time, but that crappy texture we made in Photoshop actually works pretty well. Like, it looks pretty close to what Thomas is doing, which is cool. So it doesn't take a lot of great art to get something pretty close. So back in the models folder, we have our new strand. So rather than use the kind of old strand, old Soul Coaster stuff, which we can maybe keep the old version, we're going to just duplicate this version, and we'll call it Soul Coaster 2. That way we're consistent. And we'll create a second Niagara system, Soul Coaster 2 system, and we'll just drag that one in. So now they'll look pretty similar. But in our new version, if I zoom in and focus on that one, in our new version, and I'll save all to make sure we don't lose anything. Open up Soul Coaster 2, and we'll close Soul Coaster 1, and we'll close Floor because we don't need it anymore. Instead of using the mesh we were using before, Soul Coaster 1, if we use Soul Coaster 2, now we're getting that kind of pulling in feeling, right? So there you go, right? We're sort of getting exactly what it is Thomas has. And in fact, the thing about Thomas's effect is that it kind of comes from some different angles. Right now, we're only spawning one mesh. We could spawn 7, right? So now they're layered on top of each other. It's a little brighter. But rather than have them all come from the same direction, we could come over here to particle spawn, and we can do, oh, actually, it's under initial particle. Rather than doing, what am I trying to say? Using mesh particles to distinguish how large these are, we could start to use, scale mode for meshes. And if we wanted these to be 5 times as large, right? We could do 5 here, or we could do a random. So this is when art starts to get fun, right? You've set up a whole system to work in a specific way, and now all you get to do is kind of change values and have some fun figuring out what looks nice. So we'll use a random range here, and now some of the strands are long, some of them are short, right? And what we could do is maybe use values from 1 to 2. Maybe 2 is too large. Maybe we want 0.5 to 1. Or maybe even something like 0.7 to 1.2. Close, but not the same. And now they're all, instead of them all laying on top of each other, we can randomize their rotation, which in Niagara is called orientation. Initial mesh orientation. So right now they're all going the same way, and we want that to be different. So the orientation vector is what we need to change. Instead of just all of them pointing in the x direction, if we use random here as well, random range, and we make that range. So now you see what's happening here. Multiples kind of pulling into the same space. So this is a lot like Thomas's effect, right? If we wanted it to be random from all directions, we could go -1 to 1, right? So now we're getting it from the top. -1 to 1, right? So that's kind of a cool. I really enjoy Soul Coasters for this reason. They give a lot for not a lot of work. So if we do -1 in our Z, now we're getting it from every angle randomly, and that's kind of cool, right? This is what. And if we go look at it in editor with the lighting, with the right lighting, and maybe we kind of pull up the effect so we can see it a little better. So it's just large is all. We could shrink everything, right? So we can go to mesh scale and make everything 0.5 to 1, right? And that way we're dealing with a little less length. The meshes that I gave us are pretty large in size, so maybe we'll shrink these considerably. So 0.1, 0.2. So yeah, so they're a bit more manageable now, and we'll zoom in and make sure we can see our effect pretty well. And then I'll hit G to hide the. Yeah, right. So now we got energy kind of coasting towards the center point, which is exactly what Thomas is doing in his effect, right? He's kind of utilizing Soul Coasters to pull in energy. And again, I'll just show you the reference so you can see that it's the same, right? It's this stuff. It's energy kind of coasting towards a center point, and then it looks really cool. So let's try to add some of the other stuff that Thomas has here. In this moment where he starts to kind of suck stuff in, he has some particle sparks kind of shooting out and pulling in. He has some kind of aura energy stuff kind of radiating out and pulling in. So let's see how much of that we can get before the end of this timing. So let's just start with sparks because they're really simple. So rather than do a burst, which I think happens, which only happens the one time, we'll kind of hide this bursting, and we'll add a spawn rate instead of a burst spawn rate. And what should happen? Oh, because it's the value of 0. I was about to say what should happen is we should see particles. So we'll do 50, so we make sure we see everything. So it's way more apparent what's happening here. So save, and we go back to the editor, and we got a bunch of stuff swirling and sucking in, which is great. We'll hide the old Soul Coaster because it's not helpful to us anymore. But it's there, just as like a this is where we started. One of the things I still need to figure out about Soul Coaster materials, which I imagine Thomas is doing this too, you get this kind of edging, artifacting, which is kind of a bummer with Soul Coasters. And the way that I've found to solve that problem is come over here to the material, and in the texture, we turn off our MIPS. So if we save here and go back to our viewport when this saves, now we're getting kind of some weird, because of the MIP values. If we're close up, we're not seeing that kind of weird dithering that happens there. So we removed one problem and introduced another. So it's kind of, I have to figure out what the best way is to mitigate those issues. But I don't like what gets introduced when you turn the MIPS off. So I have to like figure out a good middle ground. None is fine. We could maybe use a mesh Fresnel so that the edges are a little softer when they're not turned towards camera. And in fact, maybe that's what we'll do here, just to see if that helps. So we could do hold M to introduce a multiply here, and if we right click and look for Fresnel, F-R-E-S. So a Fresnel is essentially like faces that are pointing towards the camera are invisible, and faces that are perpendicular to the camera or pointing away from the camera are visible. So it gives you that kind of haloing effect. Specifically on a sphere, it's pretty obvious that the edges are white and the center is black. But with other meshes, it's the same behavior. In our case, I think what's happening is that the edging of these meshes is visible to us when we don't want it to be. So the faces that are facing our way are too visible on the edges. So maybe what we want is like a reverse of the Fresnel. I don't know. Maybe this doesn't help us at all, but it's a thought. Maybe we do a 1 minus here, and we multiply this against, and then we throw that into the opacity multiplication, and see if maybe on the edge of our mesh it's a little less visible. Could be. When we are kind of straight on, maybe we can do a top down. Yeah, see, lit, top down lit. Yeah, see, it's still hard. It's hard to see. Figuring out how to do visual effects is sometimes, or to look at your visual effect in a way that sort of describes your problem is tough sometimes. But I think this is going to help. I'm going to save this, and I'm going to go back to Engine, and we'll see what that looks like. One of the things I want to do is start adding some of the bits, though, before we get to the end of this thing. So let's jump in and add some sparks. Let's add some kind of energy curls and stuff. It's a little less visible, which is good. Let's add a center that kind of feels like growing energy. Yeah. Like a big flare and stuff. Okay, let's do some of that stuff. So back in the material editor, if I right click and I create a new material, this is going to be useful for two things. We're going to call it M underscore flare, and then let me make sure the recording's still happening. It is. Cool. If we open up flare, I think we can do away with Soul Coaster for the moment. In flare, what we're going to create is a simple gradient. In terms of the effect that's happening for Thomas, these sparks that are coming in, which I think there's a freeze frame of them, are just gradient circles that are a bit more hard edged, and maybe he's doing something specifically unique. I'll show you what I would do to get close to what he has. So if I right click and I look for radial gradient exponential, Unreal Engine comes with a node that creates a gradient for us. If I plug this into emissive and we just look at it on a plane here, so we get a gradient circle, which is what we want, right? To make this more interesting, we could use two of these, one of which has a different radius and the other of which has a different density. So we'll add these two things together. And then before we plug it in and see what it looks like, I want to change the radius on this one. So oh, sorry, I'm doing preview, stop previewing. Right click, promote this to a variable. It doesn't give me that. Interesting. Okay. Hold 1 and left click to create a variable. And you can right click, convert to parameter, or if anyone's ever interested, we'll just call this radius. You can hold S and left click, and that does the same thing. So we don't need this one yet. We'll call this radius. I think the default is what, 0.5? So we'll make the radius 0.3. And then we'll plug this into the emissive and see what that looks like. So it should be that there's two circles. One in the center is a little hotter than the other. I think because the value of, or the density of our larger of the two circles is too high, density's 2.33 initially, I'm going to hold S and click, and I'm going to name this density. Oh, if I could spell. Density. And I'm gonna make the density of this 1 for now, and we're gonna look and see what that looks like. So we're starting to get what I want, which is a center circle that's a little bit hotter and then kind of a soft fall off edge. Maybe what I'll do is multiply this value by 2, or we could do it a different way. We can use a smooth step. There's all kinds of ways to do this, but essentially I want the center to have a harder edge. Multiplying times 2. Let's do this instead. Smooth step. So if we use a smooth step and plug this value, hold control, and you can move pins. I don't know if sometimes I try to mention a lot of these little kind of Unreal hacks. If you hold control and click on a pin, you can move it and then redrop it, as opposed to holding Alt and clicking and removing the pin altogether. I don't know if that helps anyone, but it was mind-blowing when I figured that out. So I'm going to hold S and click, and I'm going to call this SS underscore value, so for smooth step value. And by default, I'm going to plug this into both, and I'm going to plug that into the add. I'm going to see if this works the way that I want it to. Right, so fully white, as opposed to if I was to say 0.7 here. Right, so hard edge circle, which is what I'm looking for, right? And I can change the hardness of that circle all I want later via the material instance. So I think we're all set up for what it is we're trying to create here. I'll give you my 2 cents after, but really what we want is the ability to change this color via the particle system. So we'll use a multiply and then use particle color. So a similar setup to what we had before. Particle color. And we'll multiply our opacity by this. And then we have to change the blend mode of this material so that we can utilize that translucency, that opacity. So translucent, and make these unlit as well. And so we'll hold control and click this pin and move it to opacity. Actually, sorry. We'll drag this pin to opacity, and then the color is going to be set by particle color. Right, so now we have kind of a white dot with kind of a halo on it, which is what I want. That's what I want. So if we save this, we can make some changes later, but we are in a good spot for this so far. So if we go back to our content browser, we want to create a new particle. So if we right click and we go to the effects tab, emitter, we'll use a template, and that template will be omnidirectional burst, and we'll hit finish, and this will be PS underscore Sparks, I guess. We'll call it Sparks, PS underscore Sparks. Let's use a lowercase s. And then we'll add PS underscore Sparks to Soul Coaster System 2. Right click, Sparks. We'll add it, and we'll save all. We should save all. We haven't saved in a while. And then in Sparks, omnidirectional burst is happening, and we don't want it to be a burst. We want it to be a spawn rate, because we want it to be constant. And we'll make the spawn rate 100. So now it's just going to kind of be spitting out stuff. We need to go to our emitter state, and instead of looping behavior being once, we'll do infinite. So now it's just firing away. And rather than use drag or velocity, we are going to let them kind of go all directions. And then rather than have them just be kind of fully sized, we want them to be velocity influenced. So if we come over here to alignment, velocity aligned. So now you can kind of see that they're pointing in a direction based on their velocity. And if we come over here to our particle size and we set it to be non-uniform random, we can make our Y values longer, 50. Why don't you? Oh, scale sprite size. I think that's okay, but it still should be. Oh, calculate mass by rotation. Yeah. If you turn that off, for some reason this thing messes stuff up. This is what we want, right? We want sparks in all directions, and that's just pretty cool to stare into the camera and look at. Trippy. Hey, buddy, my dog eating his own hand. We got about 30 minutes left, and so I want to get us to the finish line here. Velocity from point will get us what we need. We just need to reverse this velocity so that these particles are sucking in instead of going out. And we need to change the radius to 200. So now they're coming in, and we need to, is 200 like a crazy large distance? I don't think it is, actually. Yeah. We need to change the scale of our particles. So let's do 20, and I'll figure out what to do about the rest of this. 1, 2. So now they're streaky like we want. And what else is happening here that's giving us this behavior? I think it's just that they're living so long that they're going through the center and going out the other side. So we'll change the lifetime. We'll change the radius to 400, and velocity from point. Oh, it's a min-max situation. That's what the problem is. Let's just remove that. Oh, it looks like we're going through light speed, doesn't it? That's kind of cool, huh? Oh, hey! Happy Effects Saturday, Zergling. It's good to see you. It's my most loyal Twitch fan, man. That's awesome. Love seeing you on the Saturday stream, Zergling. So we're looking for this kind of sucking in effect, right? So now we're cooking with gas here. I think we want to go back to scaling them at the end of their life. So they're scaling down, and we'll probably want it to be faster, the speed at which they travel. So negative 200 is probably better. And so that necessitates us changing the lifetimes to be smaller, maybe even halving them all together, and then that way we can increase the speed. Right, so what's happening is if I don't kill them before they get to the center, they go through and shoot out the other way, and we don't want that. So if I increase my speed but I don't change my lifetimes, then they travel through the center and go out the other way. So let's do -300. Yeah, so now we're getting there. Yeah. -300 is working for me. So now we're gathering energies. It could be that we maybe even want to go harder than that, like 0.3, 0.15, and then increase this to like -500. That way we get like a true sense of like gathering at a speed. Some of these aren't even reaching. Let's make the lifetimes consistent. That way we know for sure that 0.3 is gonna get us all the way to the center. And the radius isn't random. Distribution? Nah, the distribution being random is fine. There's no offsets. We're scaling the particles. All their lifetimes are the same. Spawn rate's the same. So if I was to come over here to velocity, see, doesn't it feel like some of them are hitting and some of them aren't? Maybe it's just my eyes. No, they are. They all are. Yeah, they all are. Interesting. Okay. Origin offset. No. Don't do that. Don't offset anything. Go dead center. Not sure. Most loyal gave you a follow a while back. Oh, no, I appreciate that, man. Yeah. Everyone who shows up's always really nice, Zergling. I think you're just part of that nice people crew that I appreciate seeing, man. So keep showing up. I think what I'll do is I'll drop the lifetimes again. We'll do direct set and we'll do 0.1 or 0.2, sorry. Yep. So we are seeing some crossing there, but it's not as heinous. And I just want to make sure there's no other kind of randomization happening here. Yeah. I think we're good. What I want to do is change the sizes again. So 0.2, so we get a little bit more fat. I'm sorry, 0.2. Let's do 3, 6. Yeah, now we're cooking. 40 instead of 20. Yeah, it's getting fun again. This is good. This is what we wanted, y'all. 4, 2. Cool. Okay. Yeah, now we got energies coming in. That's good. It's good stuff. Let's zoom back into our centerpiece here. It still feels like maybe we're okay. We need a focal point is what we need. So let's do the next part of this. One is we didn't use our material. Let's go use the material we made for our flares. And I want to use an instance of that because if I don't, when we go use it for the other reason, we might get some behavior we don't want. So let's use flare instance 1. Save it all. Oh, not save as, save all. You go ahead and compile, my friend. There you go. So that's a bit more kind of shiny in the center. We're not using the same color from our other. Oh, here's a cool fun fact. You can save colors. I don't know if I say this all the time on streams, but people are always blown away. So if I drag and drop this color from here, you can save it in the color picker, and that's really useful because you can make this the color for everything if you want, which is what I'm going to do here. So now we got blue stuff being sucked in, and I think in the reference he uses like multiple colors, right, or something. Yeah, some of them are a little bit dark blue, and some of them are that turquoise color. So maybe we'll do a random. Ooh, I like this. So what if I did? So if I wanted a random two colors, two different colors, and I wanted to random and choose each of those two different colors, not the ones in between, but just one or the other. If I did random range, I'm going to get all the values in between those two colors. But if I did a bool, oh, don't crash or anything. Cool. So if it's true, we get white, and if it's false, we get black. But in our case, if it's true, we get our first color, and if it's false, we get, let's just start with something like crazy, like a red color that's like 10 or something. So right now, this bool is true every time. And so we're always going to get blue. But if I randomize the bool based on particle lifetime, every other particle, we're going to roll the dice and see if we get red or blue, red or blue, red or blue, right? As opposed to getting all the values in between, which we do not want. So now, instead of this kind of blue color, we can do something kind of dark blue like he has. It's just a little different. It helps give some kind of variation in tone, which I think is a smart move. Now we're getting a little of each. I'm kind of disappointed because the sparks don't, they're not nearly as like vivid and like in your face as I thought they would be. That's a little better. I think my distance was too long. And we need a center focal point for sure. But at least they feel like they're kind of coming in. I want to make them a little thinner again. So 2, 1, save. Yeah. And if I'm being honest, I kind of want them to be like super bright, like 200, like hella bright. Yeah, that's better. Now we're doing it. 100 maybe. Yeah. Sometimes I get real like crunk about a thing because I'm like, that's what I'm looking for. That fucking hot energy is what I'm looking for. Save all. Effects, sometimes you just gotta make a value like something crazy and see if it like hits with you. So there you go. Now we're in it, y'all. Oh wait, did I save that? Compile. Yeah, now we're in it. So I do think changing the other pieces to be brighter was the way to go. I think maybe these streaks are inappropriately bright at this moment, so we'll go back and change this to be like 100 or something. I don't know. It's the artistic decision making, right? These projects, by the way, are always available after these streams on Patreon. I give them to patrons to pick through and mess around with because I want people to learn. Even beyond the videos, I want you to be able to be like, oh, this is what an effect this is how I might construct an effect myself, given all the same assets and whatever. So if you're interested in that, become a patron. I'm going to make this 0.17. Oh, wait. I made it 1.7. That's really pretty. It's not the intention, but it's real pretty. 0.17. There you go. So save this. It was better before. Let's keep it at 0.2. And let's make our center flare. So this thing is going to be a new particle system. We'll save all. We had about 20 minutes or so left. So instead of sparks, which we're going to just duplicate, we're going to call this flare. And in flare, we're going to open up and we're going to kill this location stuff. We're going to kill this velocity stuff. And we're just going to get kind of a flare like this, which is great. What we're going to do, instead of velocity aligned, that's pretty cool too. I don't hate that, if I'm being honest. I really don't hate that. Maybe we'll save a duplicate of this, because maybe it'll help. Flare. Nope. Copy paste. And in flare 2, we're just going to call it center burst. Yep. And maybe we'll add center burst to this thing. and maybe we'll come back and doctor up center burst later. Sometimes you just gotta create right off the cuff, man. You don't need any like direction or anything you're looking at. You're like, oh, that's pretty cool, and you just go with it. So yeah, I like that. I think it's helping a little. One of the things I wanted to show everyone while we're creating some cool stuff today is let's change the size of these because it's gonna bug me. 0.5 and 10. There you go. Now it's a little less kooky. 2 is fine. I just wanted to show you that with the Soul Coasters, which was the whole point of today's exercise, that right now we're utilizing the texture along the entirety of the mesh when we roll it on. And that's not always the behavior you want, right? Sometimes what you want is more space or for the texture to occupy less space on the mesh as it scrolls on. And one way to accomplish that is to come here to Photoshop. We'll save a second version of this as a TGA. You can copy paste this terrible texture, which I stand by the fact that it's not a good texture, but it's working for us in terms of the Soul Coaster. And you can scrunch it towards the top. You see? Something like this. And I'll even move it up, and I'll hit enter, and we'll save this as a targa, and we'll call this lines underscore squish, which I think is a funny word, and then we'll just save that. So back in the engine, we're going to import that squish version. And if we come over here to our materials, bless you, my dog Osiris, and we double click on it to go inside. Right now we just are using this texture by default, but we can make this a parameter, convert to parameter. And we'll just call this texture. That's the name of the parameter. And we'll save this. And so if we use a material instance, we can change the texture that's being used there, and we're going to switch it to the squish version and see what that looks like for the effect. So if we right-click material instance and come in here, we can check on texture, and we can use the squish version. So now only a small portion of the entirety of this mesh, which you can't see, but if we were to go to brush wireframe, the whole mesh, only this little portion of it has the texture, as opposed to before when the texture rolled on, it was the whole mesh. So what that's going to give us is a different feeling for how that energy pulls in on these strands, on these Soul Coasters. So if I go back to Particles, Soul Coaster 2, and I change the material from Soul Coaster to Soul Coaster Instance, right? Now the energy that's being kind of strung along or run in is a bit more maybe chaotic, but at least it's it's being kind of stretched along, as opposed to like seeing the texture be represented on the whole space, if that makes sense. And so the reason it's so fast now, by the way, is because the lifetime of these particles is only a half second here. So if we double them, it's a little bit slower, right? But what I like is that kind of trailing in feeling is more apparent when there is less texture on the texture space represented, right? And so I think that's a worthwhile change that we just made, which is cool. And I really like this kind of energy gathering feeling we have going here. I think we're in like a good spot with some of this stuff. Let's do our center flare. let's add some kind of gathering energies, and then we'll just close out for today. I just think this is really useful, and we learned about Soul Coasters, so no reason to kind of like break the bank or anything on what we learned, because I think we did good. So let's yeah, let's do our solar flare, which is a I immediately thought of solar flare from Dragon Ball. If there are any Dragon Ball fans out there, if we go into flare, right, which is different than center burst. If we go to flare, and we turn off velocity align, which we did, and we come over here to random rotation, we can just make this a direct set, and we can set it to be 0.5. I think it's a 0 to 1, right? Or maybe it's not. Maybe it's 90. Yeah, there you go. So now it's kind of like that hot, like when something is like really cool in sci-fi shows, it's got that kind of shing, like that long, hot solar flare. This is supposed to represent that for us. We want it to be longer, and let's spawn less of them. So yeah, so it's a little more chaotic, and let's make it longer. So maybe the randomization is actually cool. Let's do 100, and let's do 60, and let's save. And one of the things I want to do is maybe we change the brightness value for, maybe 200 was right. I don't know. This is the fun of art, when you get the chance to kind of change some stuff. Yeah, let's see what that looks like. We'll add this to the Soul Coaster 2 system. Add flare. So now we got that kind of. We could even, rather than using flare rather than using center the way that we're using it, I think the sparks are fine, and I think Soul Coaster is fine. And flare material is okay. And we don't need this anymore, or this. Kind of close out some stuff here. Rather than using center burst as kind of a random thing here, I think what we could do is similarly randomize the rotation of this particle by using something like we could use a random here, but we could use a bool, much like we did with color, make float from bool, and if it's one value, which is a value of, or if it's true, it'll be a value of 1, and or a value of 0, and if it's false, it's a value of 90. And it's always true, right? So right now it's going to be 0, but if we randomize the bool so that every particle spawns and has a value of true or false, so random, what we'll get is that kind of hot kind of moving cross thing that they do in anime, and we can use this as that centerpiece instead. So what if we made this like 80? That's actually pretty cool looking, but it kind of negates the center flare, doesn't it? It's pretty cool looking, but it negates the center flare we made. So let's I guess I could even rotate them so that they're not. Okay, how about this? What if I did 45, what's the other angle? Not 90, 120? 45 or 120? Yeah, there you go. Now it's crossed, and I'm gonna bring 800 is a ridiculous number. I'm gonna do 300 maybe. Maybe that's still ridiculous, but let's look at what that looks like. Save. It's still pretty crazy, but I think what this means is that we need to make our center flare something like 300, and then we need to make these bursts something like 100. And then save. So yeah, so now we got something going here. It's looking pretty cool. I think we need maybe one, we need a third angle that could be vertical, or maybe the vertical one is a secondary particle. Yeah. We only give ourselves two. I mean, it's true false. That's what bools are. We can do. Yeah. Okay. Okay. We're gonna get sneaky here. If this bool is true, then we're gonna do another bool for each of these. This is kids don't tell your parents about this. We're gonna do two bools. This is illegal math. This is illegal math. So essentially, we're gonna do if we're gonna give ourselves two values every time this bool happens. So a particle is spawned, and then a dice is rolled, and it's either A or B. And if it's A, another dice is rolled, and then that chooses between one or two values, right? So we'll randomize these two. Rand. So we're randomizing the bool that chooses true false, and then we're randomizing the result of that true false with another bool. And so in both of those occasions, we're either going to use 0, which is vertical, or our 45-degree angle, or we're going to use 0, which is vertical, or our 120-degree angle, right? So now we got our three values. Math's cool. Yeah, right? So now we got energies flowing in. We got our kind of hot center line thing going. We probably could change the scale of these to be 70, and then make these like 1.5, 0.5, skinny them up a little, and then fatten our flare a little bit to be like 1, 3, 5. 5 is probably too much. 3. Okay. So yeah. So now we got energies flowing in. It's looking real cool. The one thing I want to do is maybe gather some energies, like not sparks, not soul coasters, not flare pieces, but more kind of energies, kind of random noise based energies. Kind of gather some of those. So let's do that to close this out. We got about 10 minutes. Save all. So a lot of ways to generate noise in this engine. We could save ourselves some time and go grab a noise texture from the internet. Let me just show you the way that I would do it. Hopefully that doesn't take too long. Let's just do material m_noise gen. I've done this on another stream, I believe, but if we go into m_noise gen and we change the shading model to unlit, opaque, and I right click and I look for a noise node, and I plug that in, we're going to get some randomized noise. And if we do it on a plane, get some randomized noise, which is great. Not useful for what we need yet, but it's good. So we're going to change this to something like Voronoi. And we want this texture to be tiling because we're going to scroll it. We don't need any turbulence. We want the value of the dots represented here, the noise represented here. If I zoom in, you can see it just looks like noise now, to be between the values of 0 and 1. Instead of between min and max values of -1 and 1. 0 and 1 is what we want for materials. We talked about that earlier. It's the most effective range of values for us. So now we get more sort of dot-based stuff. And I know it's hard to see now, but that's I'm going to fix that up for us here in a second. So to get the repeating we need, we're going to change the scale and the repeat size to be the same value. So a value of 8 and a value of 8 for scale. We're going to let that load. Come on. So now we get the material is repeating at the moment. We want to change our levels to be smaller. We need less levels of detail. And if you can see, we're getting towards one of those kind of Voronoi textures that maybe you would have created in Substance Designer or something like this. We want to increase the what is it, quality? Sorry, hard to do on the fly with folks out there. Wait. I mean, usually 2. 2. We want to keep this at 2. Sorry, hold on. It's hard to remember sometimes. The yeah. We want to raise this to 4. Maybe we getting there. Okay. The only thing that I don't like is texture coordinate. Sorry, text coordinate. This is going to take a long time. Let's do this the other way before I finish this, because I don't want to. What happens is I get really into it and I like go over on time and whatever. Let's just do this. Noise texture. More specifically, Voronoi noise texture. Yeah, and we'll make it seamless ourselves if it's not seamless. But all we need is one of these guys, something Voronoi-y. This doesn't look like it's going to tile, so maybe we could grab one that will tile. All we want is something, and I can go through the motions of tiling it myself. It's just faster if I don't. Let's just save this. And again, I was about to generate this for you, but I just think this is faster so we don't like cruise through 2 o'clock and spend a bunch of time figuring out how to make a texture. This kind of thing that he has going here, this is the same. It's Voronoi noise. You can build it in a bunch of different ways, Photoshop, whatever. But one of the ways is to generate noise yourself. And another way is to grab it from a filter forge, and another way is to paint it. I'm going to open with Photoshop. Since we already got a document open, I'm going to look at the document size. Documents always should be a power of 2. I think this image was 1024 by 1024. It is. Okay. So I'm going to zoom in. What will happen probably, because a lot of times when you try to get a texture off the internet, this is the case. Your edges are black, and then so you get this weird edging problem. Let me filter other offset, which will give us the ability to see whether or not this tiles, and it doesn't, which is fine. Let's just make it tile rather than going and trying to find another texture. I'm going to grab this stuff. So I'm going to do a selection, and I'm going to select kind of most of the center here. And I'm going to do the same thing vertically, hold shift and select the center here. And I'm going to do select, and I'm going to do modify, feather, and I'm going to feather this selection by like 100 pixels, meaning kind of soften the edges of the selection. And then I'm going to do a filter, blur, Gaussian blur. And that's not going to correct all of the problems, but it's, it'll help a little. And then Control D, and I'm going to grab a brush. And you and I both know that my Photoshop isn't currently working, or it wasn't earlier for those who are joining us late. So I'm going to see if clone stamping makes any sense right now without like a soft brush. Oh, Oh, it's yeah. Oh, because my clone stamps got a soft. Yeah. Okay, so this is a good way to we can fix it up this way. Awesome. Okay. Oh, nope. That's bad. The last two clone stamps were bad. Okay. Uh, yeah, this is easy. We'll just clone stamp away our problems. Yep. Just nope. Let's just paint that out. It's good. Yep. And we're just painting away our seams here, y'all. That's all. Oh, stop it. Get that going. It's gonna have to work for the moment. There we go. Soften that a little. It's gonna have to work for just the moment here. Okay. Um, maybe I can do not such a bang up job here at the bottom. There we go. Yeah, we're good. Okay. Yeah, it's not bad. It'll tile for now. Um, so we're gonna save this as. Yeah, we got about 2 minutes. Awesome. PC F drive. What am I doing? Unreal Projects, Twitch. Today's date, Soul Coaster, content, textures, and we'll just call this T underscore Voronoi noise. Boom. Save. And go back to the engine here. And the only thing I want to do is go to the material editor and right click, create a material, M underscore noise energy. And then in noise energy, we are gonna come up here and hold T and come on down here and grab our Voronoi noise and jam this into our emissive color. And look at this on a card or on a plane. What we want is sort of a what's the word I'm looking for? Polar behavior. So we can look for a built-in editor node called vector2, right? It's vector2 radial, vector to radial, right? Yeah. So so we can get radial coordinates from this. And then we need to give it a texture coordinate, text coord. See, so we already have kind of that radial pulling in kind of feeling already. And so texture coordinate, and we need a Boolean, promote to variable, and make this false. And subtract 0.5, which puts our center back in our center. Which I guess if I didn't use texture coordinates, because I need a panner. Because I need to pan. This is why I'm doing this. Subtract 0.5. And now it'll be back in the center. Yep. Okay. So this is the setup I wanted. Essentially, I turned generic texture coordinates into radial using vector to radial. And all I really want to do is something we talked about earlier, which is just use a panner. Yeah, 201. I know. I'm looking. 201. So we use a panner and give ourselves the ability to change the speed with a append. And plug this into speed, because speed is a vector 2, and if we use two float values, we can create a vector 2. The second of which will be driven by particles. So I have to figure out which one is going to be which. But if this is a value of 1, what happens? Does it scroll inward? I can't remember. Let's see. If what we get here is texture scrolling inward, we'll jump back to the, oh, that is not what's happening. Maybe we need to do, oh, okay. Let's do this after. Let's do this after the radial. Let's do it here. Is that better? Are you going to cry? Come on, load up. There we go. Okay, so that's rotating around the outside. We want the X value to be coming towards the center, which is gathering energy towards the middle. So yeah, so panning inward. So we'll just make no rotation, pan inward. And we could probably have done this with a mesh or something too, but I just figured sprites would be faster, and maybe I was wrong about that. All we really want to do here is change this to be unlit, change the blend mode to be translucent, and we want to drag this into opacity, and we want to do our same particle color setup, and we want to multiply our mask by our emissive, or our opacity for our particles, and we want to multiply our color, plug our particle color into our emissive color. That'll let us change the color of our particles, and this will let us change the opacity of our particles. The only other thing I want to do is add fall off, because this just looks like a big rectangle, which is not helpful. So radial gradient, nope, sorry, I didn't spell that right. Radial, yeah, radial gradient exponential, which we used earlier, which is just a big circle fall off with fall off on the edges. So I'm going to multiply this math we did by that kind of circle fall off. And there you go, right? Kind of a gathering energy kind of thing, which is what I was trying to do. So if we go back to our particle systems and we add that to the mix of what we have, that'll be kind of where this all lands. I think we already have something really cool looking, but we'll just add that last layer. So if we go over to particles, and we will maybe duplicate flare, duplicate it, and we'll call this noise energy. And if we go into noise energy and we what do we want to do? Let's just change this material to be the noise energy material, and go to particles, and let's change this to be uniform, and a value of 10 is fine. And let's make the spawn rate 2, and maybe 4, and let's make the particles bigger so we can see. 300. Are they shrinking? Yeah, let's not change their size. And their life. Oh, no one! Don't look at this. Sorry. I don't want anyone with epilepsy to have issues. 1. There we go. That's a little easier to watch. Okay. I'm gonna turn down the value of the brightness, and so now it's just kind of gathering energy. One of the things you'll probably notice is there's this kind of line here, and that's another MIPing issue, much like I was talking about earlier. One way to solve that is to come in here and turn the MIP values to 0. And this fixes it. And then if I go back to the editor and see, now we just kind of got some gathering energy, and it's changing shades, and that's totally okay. What I want to do is go to color and add a key here, and at 0.5 we'll make this a fully visible, but at the beginning of their lifetimes we'll make this a 0. So now they kind of ramp on and ramp off. And if I right click and do auto here, there you go, right? So if we add this to the mix of what we have, it's kind of dancing in the realm of what Thomas made. But let's add it in and see what happens. I think it's pretty cool looking already. Maybe the noise energy adds something. Maybe it doesn't. We're gonna see. It's pretty gross looking. But what I do is maybe just turn down this opacity to something like 0.3 or maybe even 0.1. So it's just like a hue of something in the background. 0.05. I think it adds kind of a nice layer of something, but it doesn't need to be humongous. It's so bright. I think maybe, so this is the thing with Niagara, and I've said this on multiple streams now. Changing a graph seems to not do anything to the system. You need to change a value in one of these value boxes. So 0.01, and then save that, and then open the system, and you'll see, like, right, like it's way less apparent now, and in the system it's way less apparent. For some reason, it's like a bug with Niagara. Like if you try to change the value of a pin in a graph, but don't change any other kind of like actual value boxes, your changes don't propagate to the system for some reason. So I think this is pretty cool looking. I think we did a good job. I think this is pretty cool looking, if I do say so myself. I really like what we made. So I hope everyone else does too. Stuff I should be saying. Come join the Let's Make Effects Discord if you're not if you're not a member yet. Let me drop a thing in the Twitch chat for you. Be part of the Patreon if you wanna get these files so you can sift through them and utilize them in your own work. Come join our Patreon. That's patreon.com. Patreon.com/Let's Make Effects. And those are links on my page as well. If you want these files, you can go there. Yeah, of course. Jess, this is always fun for me. I love doing these on the weekends. I love when people show up and learn something. Please join our Discord. It's free. You don't have to pay anything. I just want to gather effects artists and make sure that they can learn in this method, this kind of low stakes method. And so if I can facilitate that, if I can give others that kind of tutelage, then I'm gonna. I have a Twitter. It's twitter.com/Let's Make Effects, which I'm about to go to because the Discord link is there, and I want to make sure anyone who's here and watching and enjoyed themselves comes and joins the community that we're growing. So in my link tree here on my Twitter, there's links to a bunch of stuff, which is cool. So I'll just drop my link tree in here, and you all can peruse those. But the one that's really important is the one at the top. Come join the Discord. It's free. I want to hear from you. I want to be able to answer your questions and give you feedback and knowledge. Just come ask me questions. I'm always here, and I really enjoy spending time with you guys. So thank you for showing up and watching me create stuff. If you have any follow-up questions, come find me on the Discord. If you're interested in learning more in this method about visual effects, I'm starting another of my 8-week live courses in February of next year, and sign up will be happening very soon. I'll put the word out for that. But yeah, thanks for watching today. Okay, and you guys have an awesome Saturday, and we'll see you next time. All right.